Distinguished mayors, professors, colleagues and friends, good day everybody. It's great to see so many here today to this second plenary panel during the World Human Rights City Forum, the 11th Human Rights City Forum. This panel is co-hosted by the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights and the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. So also a warm welcome to my co-host, Bahram Ghazi, from the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. Great to see you here as well. I'm Morten Kjærum, I'm director of the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, and I look very much forward to the discussion that we're going to have here today on a crucial topic. The World Human Rights City Forum 2021 is organized against the backdrop of a global pandemic. The crisis has revealed the full clarity of the cruel effects of inequality, both within and between countries. Among these effects, exposure to the virus, for instance, has been multiplied in cramped housing and communities where access to clean water and other basic commodities is in short supply or totally absent. As another grim reminder of systemic inequality, we witness how life or death became a matter of resources where access to oxygen, hospitals, not to talk about vaccines, are provided based on free market principles rather than on human rights and a global common good. As the UN Secretary General stressed yesterday in his opening remarks, there is a need for a new social contract. These inequalities are not new, but have roots going back to historic injustices and inequality that still are built into the very structure of societies and national and global institutions. Therefore, a new social contract is not merely an ambition, but a prerequisite for a peaceful and sustainable future. So what does this new social contract mean? How can broken trust be mended? And how do we start concretely and locally to move in the needed direction? The new social contract would aim to reset the foundation of national and global governance by recognizing the equal access to human rights for all as a founding principle. The new social contract will forcefully address inequalities that erode these rights and then seek to ensure that governance proceeds in line with agreed principles. So this second plenary session will introduce reasons why and how human rights can and must become a core pillar of this New Deal. It would do so both broadly, more generally, as well as from the perspective of local government leaders, setting the stage for deeper reflections that for sure will continue beyond this panel. We have here an excellent panel to inspire the discussion and the reflections. The panel is divided into two key topics. First, we will have a look at the structural issues highlighted by the pandemic. And then we move on to a discussion on the social discontent before and after the pandemic. In between the two parts, we will open for questions and comments. Please use the Q&A facility to put your questions as well as comments. And they will also be kept for later, and we will definitely make use of them. And we may come back to you if we do not have time to respond to all the questions. After the second round of panel interventions, we will again have possibilities for Q&A and a bit of discussion between the panelists. So each speaker will have 8 minutes, apart from the keynote speaker, who will get 10. So without further ado, I'm very pleased now to give the floor to Professor Olivier de Schutter, who is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on human rights and poverty. So the floor is yours, Olivier. Welcome.
Many thanks, Excellencies, my very dear friend, Morten Kjerum. It's a great pleasure to be with you on this panel, which is co-convened by the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the organizers of the World Human Rights Cities Forum. Let me be very clear. I believe cities and local governments have a crucial role to play in implementing economic and social rights, the rights to housing, to food, to health, or to education. In most countries, indeed, it is at municipal level, with municipal budgets, that social housing projects can develop, that land zoning ordinances are adopted, allowing to improve linkages between cities and their rural hinterland, that hospitals and healthcare centers are established, and indeed, that schools are set up and teachers are paid. Moreover, it is often at the local level that social protection is delivered to the local population. And finally, certain municipalities have been providing a space for experimenting with innovative tools to protect economic and social rights. For example, in France, since 2016, a number of municipalities have developed the idea of territories without long-term unemployment, providing long-term unemployed people with access to jobs created by undertakings especially established to provide employment opportunities, providing services to the population in the care economy, or to green the economy, or launch environmentally sound projects. The agility of cities, their ability to respond swiftly and effectively to potential human rights crises, was particularly visible during the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, some cities have sought to better protect undocumented migrant residents who have suffered particularly during the lockdown period and the aftermath of the health crisis in many contexts. In Tunisia, for example, the city of Sfax launched a campaign to identify the needs of migrant residents and find ways to distribute solidarity food baskets or food vouchers to sustain their basic needs during the lockdown. And up to 1,200 benefited from these donations coordinated by the municipality together with the International Organization for Migration. Many municipalities during the crisis provided food to the population or provided relief to allow residents to pay their rents during the crisis. The government of Montevideo in Uruguay distributed 10,000 solidarity baskets for vulnerable households, including food and medical utilities. In Birmingham, 7,000 food parcels were provided to vulnerable residents. In Cascais, in Portugal, a solidarity system was developed allowing to distribute food parcels to residents. Particular attention went also to older residents during the crisis. Mexico City ensured these populations access to food and medicines by delivering it directly to their homes. In a similar vein, in Italy, Bologna launched the programs of Piano Mais and L'Unione Fa la Spesa, Union to do the groceries, to monitor the situation of senior residents via phone call and establishing home delivery of food supplies and pharmaceutical products, going to senior residents, to people with disabilities, to people with chronic diseases. These services were activated thanks to a protocol between the municipality of Bologna and local civil society organizations. In Argentina, Buenos Aires fostered the creation of a network, Mayores Cuidados, taking care of senior citizens, where local residents helped monitor the situation of older persons and offer them with various kinds of support during the lockdown. In order to protect the right to housing and prevent the risk of people falling into poverty as a result of a loss of income, measures were taken, for example, by the Municipal Council of Washington, D.C. in the US, who passed a relief bill allowing to defer mortgage and rent payments, prohibiting the implementation of rent increases during the emergency, and allowing tenants who risked being vacated from their houses to remain in their units until the emergency was over. And we have examples in Montevideo, in Bogota, in Paris, in London, to a similar effect. Now, municipal policies in these areas, I believe, would be further strengthened if grounded in the normative framework of human rights, and if benefits to be provided were defined as legal entitlements that beneficiaries can claim before independent bodies. This would mean four things. First, it would mean a clear definition of both beneficiaries and the entitlements in question. Secondly, it would mean accessible information to beneficiaries about their rights, including by reaching out to the most marginalized populations, people in informal settlements, homeless people, including street children, people without internet access, for example. Thirdly, it would mean effective access to locally established independent bodies where claims to benefits are rejected. Fourth and finally, it would mean protection from corruption, bribery, the protection of whistleblowers, for example, and from discrimination, including discrimination on grounds of socioeconomic disadvantage. What difference would this make? Well, first of all, it would transform the relationship between service providers and users and thus improve accountability. A rights-based approach would reduce the risks of discrimination, of corruption in the delivery of goods and services essential to lead a decent life. It would reduce the rates of non-take-up of benefits, which often stem from the fear or the shame of users who do not want to be stigmatized as depending on public charity. Indeed, estimates of non-take-up of minimum income benefits in European countries for 2016 were approximately between 50 and 80%. And in OECD countries, non-take-up of benefits was 40 to 80% in the case of social assistance and housing programs, and 60 to 80% for unemployment compensation. Secondly, a rights-based approach would ensure that the services provided are adequate, in other terms, of acceptable quality. The risk otherwise is, as once noted by Richard Titmuss, that services for the poor are poor services. Where delivery is top-down, without accountability, municipalities and local service providers may be tempted to tick the boxes, seeking to reach certain quantitative targets, number of beds in shelters for women victims of domestic violence, number of low-income families receiving food aid, percentage of children finishing high school, but this can be at the expense of the quality or adequacy of the service provided, in part because it is very difficult to monitor, to measure objectively such quality. Creating accountability schemes could reduce that risk. For example, by allowing women to complain about the poor equipment in the shelters, to allow families to denounce the quality of the food rations they receive, or by allowing parents to complain about the teachers' repeated absenteeism. Ensuring adequacy in the provision of services would be strongly encouraged by establishing various forms of participation of the public or the end users in the design, implementation, and evaluation of services, and local collectivities are much better equipped to ensure such direct participation than would be possible at higher levels of governance. I was very impressed, for example, in Canada by the Toronto First Duty project, launched in 5 localities in support of early childhood education. One component of this project was to improve the involvement of parents in their child's education by giving parents an opportunity to participate in several extracurricular activities, and this resulted in parents interacting with school officials and in minority groups being much more present in their child's education. Third and finally, a rights-based approach to delivery of public services in areas such as health, education, or housing also ensures that affirmative action will be taken to ensure low-income households will be prioritized in the form of targeted universalism that should contribute to reducing inequalities. In Brazil, for example, the city of Rio, where the vast majority of basic education schools are managed by the city municipality, proposed under the leadership of Secretary of Education Claudia Costin in 2014-2016 to reform schools located in disadvantaged areas by providing those schools better equipment and allowing better access to quality education for children in these neighborhoods. Now, for all these reasons, I'm convinced that cities should lead the objective of achieving the full realization of economic and social rights, and they have a major contribution to make to the fight against poverty and social exclusion. I strongly believe a human rights-based approach can help, based on the guarantees of legal entitlements, of accountability, and of participation. I would like to thank you very warmly for being part of this movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor De Schutter, for this elegant framing of our discussion and pointing to all the key elements of the human rights-based approach. I think this would really feed extremely well into our discussions here. And we look forward to you coming back when we have the question and answer sessions. So let me continue now with our first speaker from the cities, Mr. Mamadou Lamine Keita, the mayor of Bignona. We are very pleased to have you with us here today. So the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour. J'espère que vous m'entendez. Merci beaucoup. Je vous remercie de nous avoir invités à prendre part à cette importante réunion qui traite d'une question très importante pour la communauté humaine et qui porte sur la protection sociale en temps de crise. Je salue tous les participants et comme mon prédécesseur vient de le dire, la crise de Covid-19 que le monde n'a pas fini de traverser, à l'instar de celles qui l'ont précédé, a révélé la nécessité d'investir davantage dans la protection sociale et la prise en charge des risques sociaux. Face à la faiblesse de l'activité économique qui a été imposée par la Covid, il était difficile pour les entreprises de garder tous les salariés et de leur assurer le même niveau de revenus. Dans beaucoup de pays comme le Sénégal, mon pays, c'est la protection sociale qui a permis de sauver des emplois et d'assurer le minimum de revenus à ceux qui sont frappés par le chômage ou la baisse d'activité. Un véritable dispositif a été mis en place par l'État du Sénégal pour accompagner ceux qui évoluent dans des secteurs qui ont été fortement touchés par la pandémie. C'était le cas des secteurs comme le tourisme, comme le transport, comme le commerce. Nous avons beaucoup de secteurs qui ont été touchés par la pandémie et l'État a été obligé de mettre en place un dispositif pour accompagner soit par des appuis en numéraire, c'est-à-dire en argent, soit par des appuis en vivres, en médicaments et en d'autres produits. Au Sénégal, nous avons ce qu'on appelle le registre national unique, qui est issu d'un recensement qui a permis d'avoir sur l'étendue du pays, d'identifier les ménages les plus vulnérables. Ce recensement a précédé, bien entendu, la survenue de la COVID-19. Et effectivement, ce registre a beaucoup servi parce que l'État s'est appuyé dessus pour pouvoir accompagner les ménages déjà identifiés comme étant vulnérables. Quand je parle de l'État, je parle en même temps des collectivités territoriales. C'est le cas dans ma ville, la ville où je suis maire. Dès le début de la pandémie, nous avons mis en place un dispositif entre la collectivité territoriale et le mouvement associatif, les services de santé et tous ceux qui devraient intervenir pour faire un bloc, essayer de faire jouer la solidarité, essayer de faire la veille, parce qu'au début de la pandémie, le plus difficile était de faire accepter par la population ceux qui seraient révélés comme porteurs donc, du virus. Il fallait les accompagner, il fallait mettre en place une équipe pour s'occuper d'eux, leur apporter le soutien moral, leur apporter en cas de besoin un soutien financier, un soutien en nourriture, surtout en nourriture, parce que lorsque quelqu'un mène une activité pour pouvoir nourrir sa famille, lorsque cette activité ne fonctionne plus, bien entendu, il va falloir que la communauté puisse s'organiser pour lui venir en aide. Donc, ce dispositif a beaucoup fonctionné dans notre commune, mais au-delà de cela, cette équipe s'est beaucoup investie, surtout avec les jeunes, à travers le mouvement associatif, pour mobiliser tout ce qui est nécessaire pour se protéger, notamment en distribuant des masques, en distribuant des gels hydroalcooliques, en faisant beaucoup de sensibilisation dans les quartiers, dans les maisons, à travers les réseaux sociaux, à travers les radios que nous avons sur place, etc., etc. Beaucoup de spots dans ce sens-là. Donc, vous voyez que beaucoup d'initiatives ont été prises et nous pensons que ce sont les attitudes qui sont attendues pendant les périodes de crise, lorsque nous voulons continuer à avoir une société harmonieuse et cohérente. Il faut que tout le monde se mette ensemble en période de crise. Toutefois, les budgets et les personnels de protection sociale de beaucoup de pays comme les nôtres ont été fortement éprouvés par la crise. Les financements et les argents mobilisés n'ont pas été toujours à la hauteur de l'ampleur du choc. Ainsi, nous pensons que le maître mot en période de crise, c'est l'adaptabilité et la résilience des systèmes de protection sociale qui constituent les enseignements majeurs à tirer de la crise de Covid-19. Nous avons des systèmes de protection sociale certainement qui fonctionnent, mais dont l'équilibre est tellement fragile que nous devons les réviser pour faciliter leur adaptabilité en période de crise. Sinon, c'est avec du retard que nous allons agir. Sinon, nous serons en difficulté en pleine période de crise et cela pourrait impacter sur l'efficacité à prendre en charge les besoins. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut aller au-delà des missions habituelles en instaurant une diversification des services offerts, mais aussi sur le plan du financement. Les efforts des services publics de protection sociale doivent être complétés par l'apport des entreprises,
One minute.
Et des collectivités territoriales, des associations et de tous ceux qui pourraient apporter un soutien. Et pour terminer, je pense que la pérennité de la protection sociale est un enjeu majeur est crucial pour nos sociétés et le maître mot pour assurer cette pérennité, c'est l'engagement. Nous devons tous être engagés, quel que soit le niveau de responsabilité, pour que les systèmes de protection sociale dans nos pays et dans nos villes puissent continuer à bien fonctionner, surtout en période de crise et pourquoi pas au-delà. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mayor Mamadou Lamine Keita, for this rich presentation and underscoring a number of the points that Professor Schutter did before, and also the need for the social protection to accommodate for the structural deficit or address the structural issues, also for pointing to the active outreach, the awareness raising. So a lot of very important point. Thanks a lot for that. And let's move on to the next speaker, Mr. Benjamin Magalon, Mayor of Gwangju.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. A pleasant and good afternoon to everyone. It is an honor to be part of this prestigious event where we can share and learn from each other's best practices. Slide 2, please. Next slide, please. I would like to highlight the role of a public servant in rebuilding and restoring trust among the people that we serve. In line with the accepted principle that public office is a public trust, accountability and responsibility for the delivery of public services rest with every public servant. As trust is earned, it is only right that the best service is given in return. Local governments are in the front line in promoting the general welfare of its constituents, but specific policies and programs should be put in place to respond to their unique requirements. This is achieved through a participatory process where feedback mechanisms are necessary components. The principle that those who have less in life should have more in law, next slide please, is a clear adherence that people are the be-all and end of all development, with emphasis that governance should level the playing field by giving preferential attention to the needs of the vulnerable sectors. Human rights-based approaches in all aspects of local governance ensure that everyone is given equal opportunity that is highlighted in the city's core agenda of development, with emphasis on good governance, clean and green environment, accessible and inclusive social and health services, and cultural and heritage. Next slide, please. The city incorporates human rights as a core pillar of local governance, reflected on the following core agenda. Under speeding up of government actions, automated systems in government transactions are gradually being put in place to make services more accessible and available to the people. This is also one way of controlling and or breaking corrupt practices and red tape in government transactions, as well as service delivery. On revitalizing the environment, people-centered development gave emphasis on the importance of revitalizing the environment and providing pedestrian-friendly spaces through parks development, provision of bike lanes, and rehabilitation of walkways. On enhancing peace and order program, we pioneered the establishment of Smart City Command Center for speedy response during emergencies and disasters, abate criminality, protect the environment, manage mobility, and enhance governance. This also allows timely collection, processing, and analysis of data for strategic decision-making. We have dedicated human rights desks in our communities and in police stations where concerns of the vulnerable sectors are ventilated and addressed. Next slide, please. On responsive education and empowering the youth, we started a scholarship program for the poor but deserving students, including provisions for stipend for honor students and those enrolled in performing arts. To uphold the rights of children, the city passed ordinances reinforcing children's welfare and protection and sustaining the Council for the Protection of Children, which the city pioneered. A seat in the City Council guarantees meaningful participation of the youth in local legislation, not to mention that all communities have a youth representative in their councils. On expanded health services, there is a new law that provides a framework fostering a whole of society approach in the development and implementation of health policies and programs. The law intends to cover all Filipinos with health insurance. LGUs will be the primary health provider. To celebrate culture, arts, crafts, and heritage, an ordinance created the Creative Baguio City Council, composed of representatives from both the creative and the public sector. This will boost the creative industry of the city of Baguio and support the United Nations framework, particularly the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the New Urban Agenda. A cultural mapping is currently undertaken to identify indigenous cultures, arts, crafts, and heritage, with the end in view of preserving and making them relevant in the current times. Next slide, please. On expanding social services to vulnerable groups, as informal settlements is a growing concern of the city, we embarked on a low-cost housing project as relocation sites, integrating green architecture and sustainable engineering design with permaculture as a livelihood component for homeowners. Amendments to the 2005 Gender Equality and Development Code of Baguio City was also passed to address emerging concerns. A halfway house for the vulnerable had been established for abused women and children in conflict with the law. The city has created a unit to cater to the needs of persons with disabilities, manned by staff who are similarly situated. Infrastructure support for the safety and easier mobility, such as ramps and tactile pavements around the city, have been constructed. A social civic center is also available for the senior citizens. Next slide, please. May I end this presentation with my thoughts that governance is beyond politics. As an elected official, I am mandated to serve with compassion and unifying leadership. It goes beyond creed, culture, gender, or status in life. There are so many learnings from this pandemic, as it surfaced many forms of infringement on human rights, whether deliberate or coincidental, affecting more the more vulnerable sector. But we will continue to heal as one and rebuild back better together. Needless to say, we as participating cities in this forum have contributed a bit of our experiences, but learned so much from this event. Thank you once again. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and for again a very rich presentation. And let me in particular highlight here your focus on empowering the youth. Just yesterday, we had a very interesting panel with a lot of recommendations from a group of youth across the Asian countries, really wanting to participate and contribute to build forward fairer or build forward together, as you rightly pointed to, Mayor. So thanks a lot for bringing that into the discussion. And I just want to now also remind all our participants to put your questions and comments in the Q&A box that we have, so we can, because after the next presentation, we will open for a small discussion before we continue with the second round of panelists. So let's move on to the last speaker in this first group of panelists, Mr. Larry Wambua, Minister of Nairobi County. Welcome to you.
Sorry, I'm trying to share my screen.
Yeah, that's.
As I look for my screen, I can start by my introductory remarks. And I'll state that thank you, Chair, the organizing committee, and the dignitaries that are present. In Kenya, right now, it is 10:30 in the morning. So here we say good morning. My name is Wambua. I am the Minister for Environment, Water and Climate Change in the city of Nairobi. A little background is that in 2010, Kenya passed a constitution that created 48 governments, 47 county governments, and one national government. Nairobi is one of such county governments, and a county is run by a governor with his cabinet. And I am one of the cabinet members in the county of Nairobi. Now, my governor couldn't be here. She's traveling. She's on some business, so she gave me this opportunity to present the case of Nairobi. First slide. Next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, the Constitution of Kenya in Chapter 2 states that national values and principles of good governance include human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, and protection of the marginalized, as well as sustainable development, among others. And Chapter 4 of that Constitution states that every person has a right to a clean and healthy environment. And there is also created in the Constitution a National Human Rights and Equality Commission. During this pandemic, Nairobi faced a lot of challenges, and we worked together with the national government, which put together a committee that coordinated activities for responding to the COVID. And one of the things that we noted immediately because of the lockdowns was that a lot of industries closed down, a lot of offices closed down, and a lot of people became vulnerable, especially those that are the poor. And we, together with the national government, we started measures to ease their suffering. And one of them was giving them free water in Bowsers. We also did 200 boreholes in informal settlements. We provided hand washing facilities, and we gave food rations because we noticed that quite a number of people were going without food. So we started distributing food to our informal settlements, and it went a long way. We also established hospitals, field hospitals in addition to the hospitals that we had, so that should there be cases of people needing hospitalization, testing, treatment, there was available medical care. Nairobi also experiences a flooding, and to alleviate the problem of flooding, we employed youth, especially from informal settlements, to clear our drainages, and this was a form of empowerment for them. Actually, they are still in employment. We are clearing our drainages. We have involved them in waste collection and clearing our streets and estates. So we provided from that a basis of some earning. We also, together with the national government, enhanced. There is a system of giving the aged some stipend at the end of a period of 2 months, and we made sure that they were better documented and all taken care of in the city of Nairobi. You can see from the slides, the one on the right is the youth that I've talked about, clearing our drains. We also, in addition to clearing our drains, we also engage them in greening our environment, like you can see on the first picture on the left. That is greening our road medians, and basically our estates. And it's done with the youth so that they can earn a living. We have also created, as a way of mitigating against climate change, we have created NMTs to ease traffic congestion and to provide better air quality in the city. And most of these works have engaged the youth. We are also in the process of constructing modern spacious markets as a measure of decongesting our market spaces. And all these are aimed at not only creating better trading spaces, but also empowering our youth and making sure that there is something in their tables at the end of the day. The city of Nairobi is also transitioning from the linear management of solid waste to green and circular model, so that we can manage our environment better. And in this process, we are engaging the youth in sorting waste and providing a market for the waste that the youth have sorted. I'll say that we have learned many lessons in a difficult situation in the city of Nairobi, but we have managed fairly well, guided by our constitution for respecting human rights, equality, dignity, and inclusiveness. Thank you very much. That is all.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for this excellent presentation. Again, giving us a lot of, let's say, insight and examples of what you're doing in the city of Nairobi. It's very impressive, and again, also underscoring the youth engagement and youth empowerment. But I would also mention what you said about, let's say, opening health facilities or making increase the capacity at the hospitals. And of course, you need probably more capacity, but also I think what is so crucial for the health sector is also to reach out to where people live. And that's one of the things that we have learned during the COVID crisis, that the health sector need to have a stronger outreach, in particular to the more vulnerable groups. So thanks a lot for that. And we have a number of good questions in the chat or in the Q&A. And the first one is for you, Mayor Magalong, talking about the integrated command center that you mentioned in your city, and I share with the one who asked the question, sort of how was it to bring together the different actors in the city, because as the person asking the question also allude to, that it's not always that easy to make the different silos talk together or police with some of the others. So could you say a few words about what you did in that regard and how it worked?
Thank you, Mr. Morten. By the way, our smart city system, we're using a Cisco technology. And the reason for that is because a lot of other countries are helping us now and providing grants for other systems to be integrated in our single platform smart city system. And this is the first smart city system in the entire country, and no other municipalities have yet established a single platform smart city in the Philippines. In fact, this is the first time that this happened. And sorry to state that we never had that experience of integrating our own system yet with the other municipalities. In fact, in our own island, because the Philippines is comprised of 3 islands, big islands, only 3 municipalities have actually come up with a smart city system, but the 2 other systems are actually a combination of different types of technologies, unlike our own system, which is purely Cisco technology. And thank you very much for raising that issue, because probably it is something that we need to delve on, how to integrate our system. But one thing that I would like to give emphasis here is make sure that your system is open for integration to other systems. Make sure that your own technology that you're using does not have any security issue or global security issue, just like what is happening in other technologies in other countries wherein Western technology does not want to integrate with those systems. One thing about our system is it has an open system which allows other types of brands, especially Western brands, that can be integrated in our own system. And I hope that the other municipalities as well will also adopt this kind of technologies, same technologies that are open, can integrate open source systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this, and also for bringing in the issue of smart cities in this regard, and illustrating how smart cities can be smart if they're human rights based. If smart cities are not human rights based, then they can be not very pleasant to live in, I think, and quite dangerous from a human rights perspective. So really interesting what you pointed to here. We have another question related to the youth, and asking, in what ways do you think youth can continue to participate in local government work in the future, for instance, in decision-making processes? I don't know who will will respond to that. Larry, I don't know if Olivier, perfect.
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Go ahead, Larry.
No, I'll take the next question. You go ahead and answer this.
Go ahead, Olivier.
Thank you. I like this question, and this is why I volunteered to answer it. I think it's really striking to see how today the young adults between 18 and say 30 years old are entering into activism in a way that is very different from in the past. In the past, they registered with political parties, they became members of unions, they demonstrated on the streets. Today, they are trying to do things. They invent new ways of producing energy, of producing and distributing food, of organizing mobility amongst them. They are developing a range of social innovations, and cities are a very important hub for those social innovations to develop. Now, my conviction is that municipal authorities have much to gain by those activists who do things rather than want things to be done for them. And municipalities have a role in stimulating those initiatives, supporting them when they have promising results, allowing experimentation to take place by adapting the local regulations so that these experiments can be led and proof can be found that they work. And I think it's a new way of moving forward, right? It's rather than the cities deciding in a top-down way what should be done for the benefit of the residents. It's creating the space for these young activists to develop their ideas. And I'm very impressed to see how this is blossoming in all regions, the reinvention of the commons in particular and of these social innovations. So I think maybe there is one question to be asked here to our fellow co-panelists who have responsibilities at municipal level, how they can work together with civil society to ensure that these social innovations can be nurtured, supported, and gradually scaled up. Thank
you very much, Olivier, and really pointing to that element of the youth, or that change in the youth approach to the work, and actually contributing in a different way. It's it's obvious that the young people have fresh minds. It's by no coincidence that the composer Mozart composed a lot of his all of his work before he was 28. So there is something to the open young mind that we should harvest and use much more in building forward. So there's a question for you, Mayor Wambua. I think you already read it. So if you could, it's about the trash collection in Nairobi that you mentioned as well.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. As I mentioned, we are in the process of transitioning from the linear model of waste management to the circular green model. We are working with youth groups, CBOs, and showing them how, working with them to separate, and what is separated, what is sellable, we connect them with the market. Regarding Dandora, it's true, court has ordered Nairobi County to close down Dandora in another 6 months. We have carried out a study that shows that what really is trash at the end of the day is about 16%. 84% can be recycled, and we have set up MRFs, material recovery facilities, in our 17 sub-counties. 2 are up and running. And in this financial year, we have set aside money to start the others and try and finish them by the end of next year. In these material recovery facilities, we are going to be separating waste. Organic waste, can be turned into manure, and we have partners that will take up our organic waste. Plastics are raw materials for other products, processes, and various other processes benefit from separated waste. So we aim through these MRFs to reduce the amount of waste that goes to Dandora to about 15%. And we will close down Dandora, create a sanitary landfill so that we do not have the eyesore that is currently at Dandora. It's an ongoing process, it's a work in process, and we'll work towards zero waste at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I think we have still space for the last question as well. And I think if you, Mr. Keita, would give a response to the question of that is being asked, that people in poverty seem to be very reluctant. How can you encourage them to participate in the municipal projects? How do you engage sort of the deprived groups in your city?
Merci beaucoup. Je pense que, comme cela a été rappelé, notamment pour les jeunes, leur participation à tout ce que nous faisons dans la commune, mais surtout lorsqu'il s'agit de faire fonctionner le système de solidarité, ça, ce sont des politiques importantes. Ici, dans la commune de Bignona, nous avons mis en place ce qu'on appelle le Conseil communal de la jeunesse. C'est-à-dire que toutes les associations de jeunesse et tous les mouvements de jeunesse sont répertoriés, sont connus, il y en a beaucoup. Les jeunes sont très dynamiques ici. Et ils se sont regroupés autour d'une structure fêtière qu'on appelle le Conseil communal de la jeunesse. Et la municipalité travaille avec ce conseil qui est le regroupement de toutes nos associations et ça permet de leur donner toute leur place dans ce que nous définissons comme politique. Nous essayons de tenir compte du point de vue des jeunes, leur apport intellectuel, parce que comme cela a été rappelé tout à l'heure, les jeunes d'aujourd'hui ont une fertilité intellectuelle et une capacité de participation qui font qu'il est important de les intégrer dans la réflexion, de tenir compte donc de leurs propositions. Et c'est comme ça qu'ils sont inclus en amont et dans la mise en œuvre également des politiques. Je vous ai dit tout à l'heure que lorsque nous devrions mener la bataille contre la COVID-19, les jeunes étaient en premier plan. C'est avec eux que nous avons mis en place le comité de lutte contre la COVID-19 dans la commune de Bignona. Et c'est avec eux que nous avons mis en œuvre ce programme intéressant financé par la commune pour faire le travail de sensibilisation, le travail d'accompagnement des ménages qui ont connu les premiers cas parce qu'au début, c'était difficile d'avoir un cas de Covid dans sa famille, dans son ménage. Les gens étaient méfiants de vous. Il fallait créer des conditions pour que les gens qui étaient dans les ménages qui étaient dans cette situation ne se sentent pas abandonnés. Donc, les jeunes sont vraiment très présents dans tout ce que nous faisons à travers leur structure, notamment le Conseil communal de la jeunesse. Les politiques de gestion des ordures, aujourd'hui, dans nos quartiers, les jeunes ont mis en place des comités de salubrité. N'est-ce pas? Ce sont des comités très dynamiques qui permettent non seulement de veiller à la propreté du cadre de vie, mais également d'accompagner la commune dans la mise en œuvre de sa politique de gestion des ordures dans la commune. Donc, dans beaucoup de secteurs, hein, vraiment, parce que nous avons ici une politique de gouvernance participative, n'est-ce pas, qui fait que la commune ne décide pas toute seule de ce qu'il faut faire à partir de nos bureaux, mais nous essayons toujours de partir de la base, de tenir compte des propositions des populations, de définir avec elles, de faire valider nos propositions par elles et de les inclure également dans la mise en œuvre. C'est comme cela que les populations s'approprient de tout ce que nous faisons. Voilà, si vous voulez, ce que je pourrais dire en ce qui concerne la façon que nous utilisons pour inclure les populations de façon effective dans ce que nous faisons, surtout les jeunes et les femmes. Et les femmes aussi, nous ne les oublions pas. Elles constituent vraiment un maillon essentiel de notre politique locale, notamment en période de crise. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for that. And let's now move on to the next part of our discussion here today on the social discontent before and after the pandemic. And I think the last comments here from Mr. Keita is a very good bridge from the first to the second panel. So may I ask for the video presentation of Mr. So Chang-rok, member of the UN Human Rights Committee.
안녕하십니까. 반갑습니다. 서창록입니다. 이렇게 중요한 행사에 이렇게 연사로 초대해 주셔서 대단히 감사합니다. 우리는 지금 인류 역사에서 중대하게 기록될 엄청난 사건을 경험하고 있습니다. 이번 코로나19가 역사 속에서 첫 팬데믹은 아니지만 그 규모나 기간을 볼 때 이렇게 전 지구적으로 모두에게 영향을 끼친 재난은 없었던 것 같습니다. 저는 오늘 이 자리를 빌어 이 팬데믹이 인류 사회에 어떤 영향을 미치고 있으며 인권적 측면에서 우리에게 무슨 교훈을 주고 있는지 말씀드리고자 합니다. 이 팬데믹은 아직 끝나지 않았습니다. 하지만 이러한 재난은 앞으로도 얼마든지 우리에게 또 다른 형태로 많이 찾아올 수 있다는 점에서 이러한 논의가 매우 중요하다고 생각합니다. 팬데믹이 우리에게 보여준 도전을 세 가지 측면에서 말씀드리겠습니다. 첫째, 팬데믹은 국민국가 중심의 기존의 국제 질서를 뒤흔들었습니다. 17세기 유럽에서 발전된 국민국가 체제는 2차 세계대전 종식 이후 유엔의 설립과 함께 전 세계적으로 공고화된 제도입니다. 이 체제 하에서 유엔의 인권 제도는 기본적으로 인권의 보호와 존중 그리고 이행의 책임을 모두 국가에게 주었습니다. 유엔은 각국의 인권 상황을 감시하고 있기는 하지만 주권과 내정 불간섭의 원칙으로 국제사회가 개별 국가들을 실질적으로 통제하기는 쉽지 않습니다. 또 국가가 그러한 의무를 다할 수 있는 능력이 없는 경우도 많이 있습니다. 이러한 문제점을 극복하기 위해 국제사회는 변화와 개혁을 위해 여러 가지 노력을 해왔지만 이번 팬데믹과 각국의 정부 대응 방식을 보며 그 제도의 한계를 더욱 명확하게 직시하게 되었습니다. 작년 초 코로나 확진자 수가 전 세계적으로 급증할 때를 생각해 보시죠. 당시 많은 사람들이 매일 미디어에서 쏟아져 나오는 국가별 확진자 통계 수치를 두고 마치 올림픽 메달수를 세듯 각국의 방역 정책을 평가하는 데 힘을 쏟았습니다. 정부마다 방역 정책은 그 국가의 문화와 법 제도에 따라 다양한 형태를 띄었지만 이때 인권 침해에서 자유로운 국가는 찾아보기 어려웠습니다. 바이러스의 확산을 막기 위해 국경을 완전히 봉쇄하기도 하고 디지털 기술을 활용해서 확진자와 접촉자를 지나치게 추적하고 통제하기도 하였습니다. 이러한 도처에서의 인권 침해에도 이를 해결하기 위한 국가들 간의 협력은 찾아보기 어려웠습니다. 백신의 분배에 있어서도 문제가 나타났습니다. 각국은 백신 확보에 모두 전력을 하는 가운데 부유한 국가들이 백신을 선점하며 백신 민족주의는 확산했습니다. 백신 민족주의가 전 지구적 팬데믹을 대응하는데 결코 효과적인 방법이 될 수는 없습니다. 백신 접종률을 높이는 것은 더 많은 사람들이 자유로운 생활을 하기 위함이지만 전 지구적 차원에서 백신 접종이 이루어지지 않는 한 우리 모든 개인은 이번 팬데믹에서 완전히 자유로워질 수 없습니다. 팬데믹이 가져온 두 번째 도전은 바로 디지털 시대의 급진화입니다. 디지털 기술은 인류 사회의 근본을 바꾸고 있습니다. 단순히 산업 구조와 경제뿐만 아니라 정치, 사회, 문화, 생활 양식까지 모두 변모시키고 있습니다. 우리가 지금 이 디지털 기술을 어떻게 발전시키고 활용하느냐는 인류 사회의 미래를 결정한다고 해도 과언이 아닙니다. 이 디지털 변화는 인권의 개념과 해석에도 큰 영향을 미치고 있습니다. 디지털 기술의 발전과 활용은 인권 증진에 크게 기여할 수도 있지만 자칫 잘못하면 상상할 수 없는, 그래서 돌이킬 수 없는 인권 침해가 생겨나고 많은 피해자가 발생할 수 있습니다. 바이러스의 확산을 방지한다는 이유로 우리는 확진자의 개인정보를 너무 쉽게 노출하고 사생활을 파헤쳤습니다. 모두 디지털 기술이 있기 때문에 가능한 일입니다. 그 피해는 사회적 소수자에게 훨씬 더 크게 나타났습니다. 이런 문제가 미래 사회에 어떠한 인권적 영향을 끼칠 것인지 아직까지 제대로 검토도 하지 못하고 있습니다. 그 피해는 예측하기도 어렵습니다. 더 늦기 전에 철저한 인권적 접근과 평가가 필요한 이유입니다. 셋째, 팬데믹은 인류의 연대 의식에도 크나큰 도전을 가지고 왔습니다. 인권의 논의에 있어서 연대는 매우 중요한 개념입니다. 서구 사회에서 인권과 민주주의 확장의 시초가 된 프랑스 혁명의 기본 가치는 자유, 평등, 그리고 박애입니다. 박애는 영어로 fraternity로 연대의 의미가 있습니다. 세계인권선언문 1조와 29조에도 형제애와 개인의 공동체에 대한 책임에 대한 기술을 하고 있습니다. 하지만 공교롭게도 1948년 세계인권선언문이 발표된 이후 인권의 담론은 개인이 가진 권리를 중심으로 전개되었고, 이에 따라 제도가 발전해 오면서 연대와 우애의 중요성은 희미해져 왔습니다. 우리는 이 정신을 지금 다시 불러일으켜야 합니다. 우리는 이번 팬데믹 상황 속에서 반목과 차별, 혐오, 낙인 찍기 등과 같은 많은 문제들을 목격하고 있습니다. 모두가 어려운 상황에서 인간 본성의 일부일지 모를 혐오가 무분별하게 포출되기 시작했습니다. 이러한 현상은 외국인 노동자, 노인, 장애인, 취약계층 등 사회적 소수자들에게 더 크게 영향을 미쳤고 그들의 고통은 훨씬 크게 나타났습니다. 우리는 이들을 모두 우리로 보고 서로 돕고 연대하는 정신이 매우 중요합니다. 초유의 전염병의 확산 방지를 위해 개인의 자유를 어느 정도 제한하는 정책은 불가피합니다. 하지만 공동체의 안전을 위해 과연 어느 정도까지 개인의 자유가 제한되어야 할지에 대한 전 지구적 사회적 합의는 없습니다. 방역을 명분으로 개인의 자유를 지나치게 침해하는 것도, 또 개인의 자유를 빙자해서 공동체의 이익을 무시하고 사회적 소수자를 차별하는 것도 모두 반인권적입니다. 이번 팬데믹은 인류에게 큰 고통을 주고 있지만 반면에 우리 미래 사회를 잘 대비하기 위한 기회이기도 합니다. 디지털 시대의 자유, 평등, 연대의 인권 정신에 대해 다시 한번 깊이 생각해 봐야 합니다. 상대방을 존중하고 배려하는 자세가 더욱 요구되고 있는 시기입니다. 국경을 초월한 연대와 협력은 더 이상 미룰 수 있는 숙제가 아니라 팬데믹을 이겨내고 우리 사회의 재건을 위해 지금, 오늘 필요합니다. 국가가 사회 계약을 통해 설립되었다고 할 때 이것이 바로 우리가 지구적 차원의 새로운 사회 계약을 논의해야 하는 이유입니다. 경청해 주셔서 감사합니다.
Thank you very much to Mr. Su Chang-rok for his excellent presentation here. And I just want, before I give the floor to the last speaker, I would like to just remind you about the Q&A, and of course that is to all the speakers. So we will sort of have a final discussion. So, but before that, I'm very pleased to welcome Ms. Marie-Louise Rønmark, Mayor of Umeå. Very pleased that you are here. And I'm sure some have noticed that the panel has not been overrun by women. We're, of course, very pleased that you are here also, because you're a fantastic mayor. But also that we have a bit of a gender diversity. I would say we had some last minute cancellation, so we had a better balance previously. So we are aware of the issue, but we're very pleased. So over to you, Marie-Louise. Good to see you.
So thank you so much for having me, and good morning and good evening wherever you are in the world. I will talk a little bit about inclusive growth. Umeå, my city, we have working with the innovation and internationalization for a long time. And 4 of our key factors is engage citizens, because the long-term effort on education and what we call in Sweden folkbildning, or people education, together with our universities, but also with the civil society and other actors. So that is number 1, engage citizens. The second one is long-term investment in culture, because you know that culture open up the human minds and the society and so on. And we were also the European Capital of Culture in 2014. So that is also a strategic device for everybody. Put culture as number 1. Then you will see changes. The third one is trust. They have tested in European Union about the social progress, and our region is number 1 in all the regions in Europe for social trust. And I think one of the reasons is that we have been working with engaged citizen and culture and so on. And the fourth is what you mentioned when you invited me now about gender question. Gender equality is a long-term commitment in Umeå, and we can see the results of the work. We all must understand that gender equality is a key to our future development. Gender equality is, besides being right in itself, also a question of making our societies better for everyone. This is already shown in research, and gender equality is good for everyone, both for men, women, boys, and girls. Because it is when we make sure everyone is part of the conversation that the truly innovative ideas will take form. We have in Umeå, my city in Sweden, a long tradition in investment in culture and education, building blocks for citizens' engagement and trust among each other. And one example of trust and cooperation are Umeå's so-called city district dialogue, where we talk to people about their neighborhood, what goes well, what needs to be improved, which places are likable, and which streets feel unsafe after nightfall. So there were a lot of people participating in 12 city districts, and we called thousands of detailed qualitative data on the attractiveness of different neighborhoods, which is an indicator for trust in the municipality. We do this in order to create neighborhoods with a strong social capital, but more important, a strong social capital in the whole city. During the initial phases of the pandemic, as we now are talking about all over the world, we saw in Umeå, my city, both how individual citizens and our civil society organizations early started to offer support, and the organizations like the Red Cross and so on started offering help with grocery shopping, but also social contact through phone calls, etc., to people in risk groups. Within the framework of the work with gender equality, we have made a campaign focusing on the fact that increased isolation can make it more difficult to detect and counteract domestic violence. A film has been made focusing on keeping in touch and continuing to contact friends and family and react if there is something that doesn't feel right. And the pandemic has also led us to, for example, questions which are the vital functions in our society and who are the bearers of these functions. And not surprisingly, to a large extent, women. and the importance of often undervalued functions carried out in the female-dominated sectors has been made more visible. So this has also made a mark on the budget and planning process going forward. Our city has unique possibility to see the big picture in a way that few or no other stakeholders in a city have. This is also means that it is imperative for cities not to lose out on this opportunity to implement a holistic understanding of sustainability when shaping the strategic development, what needs to take place in the post-COVID recovery. We also need to highlight that we now, what people have missed during the pandemic, they have missed other people. It is the human component that we miss, interacting and being with others. This gives us a clear indication that it is what leads to well-being, and we build on that. So it's all about, to conclude, trust, developing the social contract, democracy, and for us, the freedom of speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rønmark. This was extremely interesting, and also thanks for bringing in the culture element as sort of the social glue contributing to the trust building. I think it's often neglected and not really sufficiently seen. And also another thing, which I must say I always favor so much, is when you actually ask citizens, how are you? Engage them, get them on board, ask them, and not only engage them, but also ask them. When we ask people how they are, what are your problems, then suddenly you have your entire agenda spelled out for you in many ways. But I must say it's not that often it actually happens. There's a certain reluctance to that. But thanks for bringing that in as well. So we are now moving on to the last part, before we have the concluding remarks from Bahram. We will have some time for additional questions. And there was one question that I actually got in the chat that I will bring in here, because that fits extremely well to you, Marie-Louise. If I can ask, you sort of you outline very well the work that you are doing in Umeå. Can I just ask you, how much do you sort of have human rights as a guiding element, or is it not sort of that much upfront? It's sort of you're just doing things. Can you unfold that a little bit for us? And of course, if others would also respond to the question of how much does a human rights-based approach actually deliberately play a role in your work, also coming back to some of the thinking that, or the presentation by Olivier in the opening.
So I must say that what the people are talking about around in my city, I used sometimes to have open meetings at the cafe when we were the European Capital of Culture in 2014. Before that, I asked the inhabitants, how should we build it up, being the European Capital of Culture? So I invited them for the cafe to have a discussion, and then they were sitting and asking me, oh, you don't know how to do it. And then I was standing there waiting for the result. And then we had a meeting at the cafe every month. And the second meeting at the cafe, everybody started to talk and giving their response what is necessary for city as Umeå. And that was wonderful. So they were very proud when we were doing that. And we have also started up very early with one of you were talking about the smart city solutions, and we are also in that smart city solutions talking about innovations and talking about to have a fast broadband. We have had the fastest broadband in the world, 5 of the fastest broadband in the world. And we started very, very early. And we always engage people about what we are talking about. And when we are building new roads or for the train, the neighborhood, other cities, they say, oh, there are so lot of people out in the street talking about what is it real? Should we really put that train in that area and so on? And we said, yes, that's fantastic. We want people to be engaged. So you give it a better solution at the end if people are engaged, and then they are not putting the finger on you. They are brave of your city instead.
Thank you very much for that. Anyone else who would like to? While you're thinking, maybe I can just. There was another question for you as well, Marie-Louise, and that is if you could elaborate a bit on how promoting culture can contribute to a better society. So they unfold that a little bit more.
Yes, some people. They are acting through culture, and that is also politics. Because if you are acting as a singer, if you're acting in the opera and so on, it's all about you open up your body, you open up the speech, you are allowed to speak out through the culture. And I used to say that culture is the one which are spreading out the new ideas, because you are going inside your body, and it let people move on in the society in another way. You can be an activist, you can be in a political party, but you can also be in a theater and try to talk about difficult questions. That's why culture is necessary. Without culture, there will be no development and, big problems.
Thank you. So, and not only, let's say, offer the culture, but also getting people to the culture institutions, make people use the offers from the local community in relation to culture. I don't see any raised hands or any other. Don't know if there's some additional, or if we should move towards the closing remarks, Baram. So I would pass the floor to you at this stage, unless there are some who would like to come in. No. So I don't see any hands. So Baram, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Morten. Maybe after my remarks, maybe there will be some reaction. So maybe you can still ask if anyone wants to react. Thanks a lot to all the speakers for their presentation. I mean, that has been extremely rich. I mean, a lot of different issues have come into the discussion. I think I don't want to try to summarize these discussions. It would be futile. But at least we know that, for example, all of the participants acknowledge the issue of participation of different groups in decision-making processes, but also in all the processes that concerns them, including in times of crisis. There was a lot of emphasis on youth. And I think that is a very important point that needs to be taken into account by all of us, including how local governments work. The issue of accountability of authorities and governance came in the discussion, including also how do we address the people in situation of vulnerability, either in normal circumstances or in times of crisis. We also had some comments in relation to national and international solidarity and how this is important when we see also the issues such as vaccine nationalism, and all of this links with the issue of trust into the authorities. We also see the deep impact of COVID on human rights, including civil political rights, hatred towards minorities, stigmatization of some specific groups. And all of these needs to be taken into account when we want to build a new social contract and also build fairer and more equal societies. Obviously, social security, access to health, etc., are fundamental human rights. They're not luxuries. They're indispensable for exercising many other rights and necessary for a life of dignity. Unfortunately, it's not the case in many places. And for instance, we know that half of the world population has no social protection coverage. And we have to also admit that both in developing and developed countries, there has been a long underinvestment in fundamental public services, and especially following the 2008 economic financial crisis. And this has had an impact on an effective response to the current pandemic. On the other side, we see that countries that have invested in quality public services through universal and comprehensive healthcare and social protection have been more resilient. I think that's an important point to take into account. That is that advancing on human rights is not just a vague moral imperative. Protecting and promoting human rights has concrete impact on building trust between inhabitants and local governments, but also it helps to prevent social discontent, unrest, and eventually violence within societies. Similarly, as we have also heard, human rights principle can be very important in terms of development, urbanization, in making them sustainable. And overall, and when we're talking about the crises, having human rights centered in policies, laws, and practices makes societies more resilient. So if we see things that have been put in place before the crisis, we can see that some have had a better response. I mean, I'm coming back to the example of Bignona and the National Registry in Senegal. They had already identified some groups that were in situation of vulnerability or maybe at risk. That has helped the response that they had in terms of the crisis. And I think thinking about human rights, putting them really in practice is something that is needed if we want to avoid situation of crisis like we have lived with the COVID. I also would like to make maybe one comment that we haven't heard that much, but it is true that the pandemic has had important economic and financial impact nationally and internationally. And we know that most of the time, moving out of from crisis management to recovery, there is temptation to introduce fiscal reforms that imposes cut into social spendings, of course, health, social protection, housing, education, and others. I mean, the lesson from the past in terms of austerity measure have shown that this has not been effective measures, and in the contrary, that has affected the capacity of societies to cope with crises, and this is something that we need to consider, because most of these decisions that are taken at international and national level have a deep impact on the local level, and not always the local governments and regional governments have a say in these decisions, but they still have to deal with it. So, I mean, that just for conclusion, I think that obviously we are all we all agree that protecting the most disadvantaged members of the society is essential, because obviously we know that typically in terms of COVID, as long as everyone cannot be safe, as long as all of the other individuals are safe. And that brings the issue of how can we distribute vaccine to places and localities where the number of vaccine has been very low, and that links the issue, local issues, with the global problems, and how the international society manages and collaborate in terms of solidarity. And obviously the short-term emergency measures that have been put in place to address the situation of the crisis will need to be thought of as a in the long term, how to obtain universal health coverage or a universal social protection. I want to thank you all for these. We as OHCHR will be, of course, here to support the local initiatives by mayors and politicians that are pushing for human rights, both at their local, national, but also at global level. And I thank you for your time and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Param, for this very elegant summing up of a very rich discussion, and thanks, Param, also for excellent collaboration in relation to the preparation of this roundtable and the forum as such. And I also want to extend a warm thank to the marvelous team in Gwangju. I mean, all those that we do not see, but would definitely make this a reality. Without them, we couldn't connect from the Philippines to Senegal to the far north of Sweden, almost close to the polar circle. So we are really embracing the world quite a bit, just being here on the screen. So, and of course, a very warm thanks to all the panelists, to the speakers, for your rich contribution to the discussion and to the further development of this issue of how do we actually build forward fairer and build forward together, so we can seize benefit from the possibilities, the window of opportunity that any crisis always offer. But let's also remember that it is a window, and windows may close. So, and it is a choice whether we want to actually hang on to some of the those possibilities and move the human rights agenda forward in our local communities, or whether we will just continue as before. But I heard a lot of very inspiring examples from all your presentations, and I'm sure that this will be moving forward. So thanks a lot, and also thanks to our audience for the good questions and comments that we got, and of course the discussions will be continued. So thank you very much. Have a nice remaining part of the day.